Do we know how many people are already in?
I don't know because I don't know how to use this software very well. But
It just says
we'll
participants three. Okay, so there's three of us.
no, there's some people full coming in now. Oh, Keith Jones is here.
Okay.
Hello, Keith.
Of course, Keith is the
Wonderful.
first one in the door.
Well, he's in Atlanta, so he's like way ahead of time. He wants to get out earlier anyway. All
That's
right, we
probably
got
true.
some
And it's
people.
Friday.
I know. Well, I kind of selected Friday because I figured that people would have their brains like fried by the end of the week, and like this would be kind of some nice like infotainment work light
Right?
Lite stuff. Oh, Danya's here. That's delightful. Henry's here. Wonderful, wonderful.
What?
Um,
Tell me more about the noise that your CRM is making.
yeah. Is it making a knocking? And does it I actually listen to Car Talk on Alexa in order to like refresh my
Prepare for
memory. I'm like,
this?
yeah, I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
how does this actually work? It's et cetera, et cetera. All right. Well, we got people like filtering in right now. I think we have a quorum, so that's good. So hey folks, so this is an experiment that we thought would be fun, where one of the things I end up doing quite a bit with folks is spitballing, solving problems with respect to sales strategy, sales operations, sales management, sales leadership, et cetera, et cetera. I normally do it on a one-to-one basis, and I forget who it was, where someone was like, "Hey, you just do this publicly." It's like, yeah, you know what? Then I kind of thought about it a little bit, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I grew up really liking Car Talk, and because it's always fun. It's like a mystery, right? You're like putting your brain to work. You're trying to like debug things, etc. And so I thought we could just like test that out with sales strategy and sales operations stuff. So what I figured is I could get another worthy in the form of Don here. Obviously,
Thank
I
you.
have a lot of excellent sales operations, sales leader folks in my network. I guess this is what happens when you run MSP. Like it turns out that you just kind of have like a wonderful cloud of amazingness that kind of orbits you. But yeah, so what our intention is just to spend the next hour just getting questions from people, popping them into the room with me and Don Juan here, and just attacking their questions, breaking it down, seeing if we can provide some recommendations there, and then kind of just moving on to the next one. We had a couple of folks who submitted questions ahead of time. So Naveen from who does sales ops at ChargeBee, Jamie who does leads SDR at Iterable, and then Tim who leads sales at Noyo. But I think what we'll do is we'll just preference people who are attending right now. Just really quick, Don, can you maybe introduce yourself to the folks
Sure.
who are attendees who
Yeah.
might not know who might not know the awesomeness that is Don?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Don Otvos. I'm a VP of RevOps at LeanData. I just started about a month ago, 2 months ago now, I guess. My background in sales operations, I started doing sales ops as the first in the door at Yammer. So when Yammer was 30 people, David Sachs wanted someone to do sales ops. I had never done it before. I somehow convinced him to hire me. I had done sales SDR work all my life. Was told by a previous VP back in the last economic turmoil of 2008. I went through a layoff, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you go find yourself a sales ops job? You're much better at that than you are at sales." So Yammer was my first cut at that. I had the opportunity to start it from scratch. Was the first in the door. They had bought Salesforce like the month before. We drove that to an $80 million run rate in about 3 years. So I was like, wow, maybe I'm good at the sales ops thing. Sold the company to Microsoft, and then I went on and did sales ops at App Annie. I led the social consulting team that pretty much worked with anybody in sales ops that was a SalesLoft customer. You've probably talked to me. And now I'm leading the the RevOps team at LeanData.
Yeah, and Yammer has like a pretty substantial sales operations diaspora, right? It's like Brendan O'Donnell did
Oh
sales
yeah,
ops there,
Jake
and then
Goldfield.
Yeah,
Dave
Jake, because he
Goldfield,
went to
who he went on
Meraki.
to Meraki. Yeah. Brennan O'Donnell went on to Survey Monkey. Yeah, we had a great team. And then some of the spots, then there are people within Yammer that went into sales operations, like Alex Miller, who's now at Sendozo.
Right.
Um, yeah, uh, it was a Yammer was a great, it was a great culture, a great company to work for, a lot of good people, and we all stayed in touch with each other.
Yeah, there's quite the diaspora there. Okay, cool. So folks who are attendees right now, what my ask would be to you is just pop your question into the chat here, and we can grab somebody to promote from there. But I think what we'll do is, since folks haven't started bubbling those up yet, Don, let's just start with one of the questions that came in ahead of time. So
Yeah.
Jamie Kronick from Interval, and actually, I guess what I should do is I should introduce myself. Everybody, I think most people who are attendees right
Who are
now
you?
know who I am. But I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make sales performance analysis software. I also am the founder of Modern Sales Pros, the nation's largest sales operations leadership enablement, et cetera, peer education community. And yeah, so previously I've done a couple of startups. My last startup, TalentBin, was acquired by Monster Worldwide. It was a recruiting software company. And so that's really where I went from being like a product marketing, product management, business generalist kind of founder to for sales rep, sales manager, sales leader, kind of like through trial and error. And that's where I really started appreciating, process excellence, analytically excellent, rigorous, quote unquote, modern go-to-market rigor. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at. So yeah, let's talk about Jamie's question here.
Sure.
So Jamie's from Iterable, and since she's not here, oh no, she is here. Actually, let's just pull her into let's see if we can pull her into promote to panelist. Oh, this is wonderful. Wonderful. Because I was just going to talk about Iterable and how much I love the company.
We're learning how to use Zoom.
I know, right? All right. So I'm going to unmute you, Jamie, and see.
Great.
You there?
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Hey. Oh my
Hi.
goodness. Your background is amazing.
That's my house.
Is that a lava lamp?
It is a lava lamp. I've had to bring a little disco into the process. If I'm going to sit at my kitchen counter, I figured I'd put something exciting behind it. It's got sparkles in it instead of the traditional glob, which I find very exciting.
That is badass. And so so Jamie, where are you based?
I'm in Denver.
Oh, that's right. Fantastic. Yeah. So Iterable is an Atrium longtime Atrium customer. We love the Iterable folks. And I remember when Dan Brayton went out to Denver to stand up the Denver office. Okay, so you're there. And
Yes.
then so Jamie, can you just introduce yourself to the other folks who are listening? Like what do you do at Iterable? And then maybe just describe like the size of the sales organization and kind of like who you guys sell to. And then we'll get into your question.
Yeah, so I am the director of sales development here. I have about 20 reps on the team right now, and then
Wow.
the sales team is probably closer to. I would say for the sales side, I think we've got about 40 reps on that side, 50 reps on that side. And so we support those reps over there. And yeah, we sell to anybody who needs digital communication. So Iterable is a front-end MarTech solution. We sit on top of a bunch of different ESPs, whether it's SendGrid or SparkPost, Design Responses.
Right.
And so, digital communications, being able to really collect, ingest, process, segment, personalize all your communications, that is our forte. And luckily for us, it's very relevant right now as everybody's moving to digital. So luckily we've sustained quite a bit. I think we've lost about a third of our verticals just in terms of like some of the hospitality. While I make a joke that we're not selling to cruise lines right now, but we actually just sold to Princess. So, it's not off the table, but certainly, one of those challenge things where we're running into a lot of folks who have either closed down, had a lot of layoffs, or just, kind of stuck right now. So certainly working with a smaller pipeline, but overall pretty good.
I imagine all those cruise providers and hotel providers are gonna have to like send people emails and push notifications to let them know that they're like, hey, we're open for business again. So that'll be good for you guys.
Yes.
Okay, so 20 SDRs, and so thank you very much for putting a question in here. So I'm just gonna read it, and maybe you can give us more flavor if needed. But so you had a question around mapping SDRs to territories, and AEs top of mind right now, and how to transition territories to new reps without losing momentum. So when you said transitioning territories to new reps without losing momentum, do we mean new like territories to new SDRs or to new AEs?
Yeah, so we had 18 territories. Some of them were open just in terms of like us pausing hiring. We expected to complete that and fill it up, but you know, we haven't been able to do that right now. We're kind of on a pause. So in doing that, we have these open territories that the SDRs are covering, but there's no AE. And I'd really like that, like when that collaboration happens, it's like magic. So you know, one of the challenges we're running into is that some of these SDRs are incredibly successful in these open territories, and some of these manned territories that are manned by the AEs are a little less successful. A lot of it has to do with, you know, New York is just a tough territory right now in general. And so, you know, we're sort of pivoting to make sure we have the coverage, but also make sure we have the collaboration. But as we know with SDRs, they need momentum. They need like months of traction. They need to get in multi-thread. And when you want to switch an SDR to a new territory, or maybe the AEs are like hand picking stuff out of a different territory, like it's just becoming a little bit complicated. And I was curious if there's a model that I don't know of or a process that I should know about that might help me do this really cleanly, so that all the work that we've done in those open territories doesn't go to waste. And that it's a really smart way to shift people from one place to another and like maintain that coverage level.
What is
So you're not having the problem of like taking somebody out of one territory, putting them into another. It's more of you have areas that are open where you have work being done by an SDR, and you're trying to figure out how to plug AEs into it.
No, it's actually the first. So what I'd like to do ideally is get them mapped together, but we have 7 SDRs, we have 14 AEs, and we need to kind of bring those together, but we've been mapped to 18 territories. So now I have to consolidate those 4 somehow. The AEs have their own idea of how they want to cherry pick like the best accounts in those territories. And then I'm like, okay, how do I make this work? How do I operationally make this work so that I'm not giving too many accounts to a rep? Because let's say I take 2 territories, now they've got double the amount of work, but like I need them to focus. So it's a little bit of a puzzle.
Well, yeah, totally. So I think what I'm hearing from you is like, we've got the number of AEs that we have, and then we've got less than that number of SDRs, right? And so right now, is there any mapping between the SDRs and the AEs, like formally?
Yeah.
Like,
So
are they 1 to 2? Like, are they tied to them?
So what we want to get to is 2 to 1. You know, we've got the 7 to 14, like 7 SDRs, 14 AEs. So it could be 2 to 1. But we've been, you know, some SDRs have been covering 3 territories because we've had 18. So now I need to consolidate those 4.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, and so I remember having this issue at TalentBin where this is back when I didn't know anything about sales. All the things that I knew about sales were stuff I had learned in like bad movies. And so I think one of the initial errors that I made was over focusing on territories as opposed to focusing on like accounts, like the value of accounts. And so one of the things, so like the example that we had at TalentBin was like I had 1 rep on like San Francisco Bay Area, and when we sold recruiting software, like technical recruiting software, and so I had like 1 rep on like San Francisco Bay Area and like 1 rep on like Seattle, Portland, which was like totally stupid because like the number of technology hiring organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area was like gigantic. Should have had like 5 reps on it. So essentially I had this like load balancing stupidity that I was doing. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was just being really rigorous around account identification using like external signifiers of demand. And so like in the case of TalentBin, what that was like, we're pretty straightforward. It's like, yo, do you have a technical recruiter in-house? If you have at least a technical recruiter in-house, you're at least meeting ICP for us. And then the more technical recruiters you have, the better, obviously. And then also, are you hiring for engineering roles? And so like those were our demand signifiers. And so what I did was I had an external, I had offshore workers that I had hired off of Upwork. One of whom is still with us at my new company, which is fantastic. She works in Bangladesh. She lives in Bangladesh. And what we would do is we would just have them do kind of like list construction and preparation, both like construction, or we would take our existing CRM data and then like use them for enrichment, because some of the demand signifiers were not, it's not like you can go into Discover.org or Zoom Info and be like, so how many open engineering roles are there? And so what we did was like, so we did that. And actually, so Manny Ortega, who now leads sales operations at Redis Labs, he was an early like head of sales operations at Outreach. He was actually a BDR at TalentBin way back in the day. But he was like one of those, you're like, you're not going to be a BDR for long. You're on the sales ops track. Clearly, you're always in spreadsheets. And so he would manage this process we called the data ops. And so we would load it in there. We would then like, you know, and then prioritize all of our accounts and then break them up. And so, and then do a bottoms up model of how many accounts the SDRs could actually adequately work. And then, because if you assign them like 800 accounts, and if you just do a bottoms up model, like how many emails they can send in a day, how many calls they can make, et cetera, and it turns out that they can adequately work 100 accounts, well, giving them 800 is dumb, right?
Yeah.
Like give the other dope ones to other people. So that's how we started out doing that. And then, you know, get like essentially giving people like their own, like, here is your pie, here is your pie, here is your pie, and then cycling it around later. And so that was like one way that we started. Don, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, the way that I've seen it done as a mistake, you know, is to have the reps tell you what deals that you know what companies they want to keep as they're going forward.
Right.
You know, and of course they're going to want to say they want to keep everything. And so, you know, what I've always tried to do when I've had to split territories like this, which is why I asked my original question about, you know, are you in a situation where reps want to have to, you know, have like holdouts, right? Like holdouts drive me crazy, right? Because you have to have a lot of rules around how that works. But like just the initial selection of what those holdouts might be when you're trying to identify, you know, what accounts should someone keep versus not keep when you're slicing up a territory is having a way to measure, you know, what engagement has a rep had with that account, right? So if you have you know, and there's tools out there that do this that can measure, you know, the level of engagement that a rep has with an account. So if a rep says, hey, I want to keep these 50 accounts, and you can look at them and go, well, okay, yeah, for these you're engaged, but these you're not. So the ones you're not engaged with, we're gonna justify that they're okay to move to another territory or give someone else to work. And I've seen that work really well. Like there's always resistance to it because they're always like, well, no, that's a really good account. It's like, well, you haven't done anything with it. So, and you don't have any traction. You know, so you telling me you want it is a little bit different than having justification of being engaged and like ripping you out of something that you're active in where it could disrupt, you know, sales. You don't want to do that. You know, you want to move things around based on lack of engagement. And so I've used that as kind of a measurement for that exercise.
Jamie, a question for you. So who owns, like in Salesforce, who owns these accounts? Is it AE that owns the account?
The AE owns the account if the AE has the territory. The SDR owns the account in the open territories.
Yeah, so I think one thing that you might be able to do that could be cool is like first what we wanted to be able to do is like prioritize these accounts. And the way to prioritize the accounts is based on external demand signifiers. Sometimes organizations. Oh, rad. Okay.
Everything's been prioritized. P1, P2, P3. P1s are AE selected. They're hand selected by those. So we've gone through that draft process using all the external identifiers, which is great. And typically P2s, P3s are owned by the SDR with the exception of open territories where there is no AE to own it. So the SDR is primarily focused on the P1s in that territory.
Yeah, so I think in what I might do there is, because I think what we were talking about is like making sure that the SDR is not overloaded, that they have the appropriate like quantum of work. Yep. And so I think what you might do there is I can imagine reporting where we say, like, I think there probably needs to be some sort of signifier on the account that this is owned by the SDR. And that's what I would say. And that might be like an additional field, right? It might be an additional lookup field where it's like SDR ownership or something like that. Because what we want to be able to do is be like, look at all of our, said 7 SDRs. We want to be able to look at all of our 7 SDRs and then, like, you know, essentially look at the bar chart and be like, whoa, look how many this person has, and like, look how many this. So I think one thing that could be good there is some sort of mechanism by which to do that leveling and understand, like, one, we got to have prioritization, and then 2, we would want to understand, okay, how much pie can we give somebody that they could actually like appropriately eat without like overfeeding them or making sure that we're not starving other people. And then the next thing would be, great, well then how much pie have we given them? Which means that we'd have to be able to report on that in some sort of capacity. And then the next step after that would be, okay, like, what about the like, are these being worked on a recurring basis in a way that's appropriate? And that's, you know, kind of like just making sure that the things are being touched and what have you. So anything else, any parting shots, Don, before we move on to the next question? We have some other ones that are coming in here.
No, I mean, I think that that touched on what I wanted to touch on.
Okay, awesome. Jamie,
Cool. Thank
absolutely
you.
delightful to see you. And
Appreciate it.
yeah, have a good weekend, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to listen in on the rest of this, but thank you, you too.
Okay, Brad, how do I do this? So I hit remove?
I think so.
No, that's going to kick Jamie out of the meeting. That's going to be terrible. I don't want to do that. Change role to attendee. Boom.
There we go.
I know how to use Zoom. Oh my God. Ridiculous.
She disappeared. I thought you kicked her out.
that would absolutely be the worst. Oh, cool. So Ryan, okay, I'm going to promote Ryan from Crexy. We'll see if he let's see if he shows up here. So Ryan leads sales for this super cool company called Crexy, but I'll let him introduce himself here. What's up, man? How's it going?
Good. That was, I gotta say, I wasn't expecting my big break this afternoon. I would have, worn something nicer. Don's making me look a little schlubby here with his outfit. I feel
right?
like I'm totally outmatched.
Don's outfit, when Don showed up, I was like, holy macaroni, you look amazing.
Friday.
I look like a picnic table.
That's too funny. So good to meet everybody. Pete has been, I was introduced to Pete a little while ago, and now I read his the mailing group religiously. What's it called? But yeah,
MSP.
MSP. I run sales ops at Crexy, and my question was about provisioning accounts, which I know is not the most glamorous part of the gig, but we've added a new billing software, so we've had to kind of reevaluate our process. And I've always wondered, because when you're associating accounts for us, it's a freemium model. So we have kind of this batch of users that you're allocating, a premium membership to. And right now that's a pretty manual process. So, some of it's a little sales ops like, some of it's more of a billing, more of a billing matter. But I guess I just kind of wanted to pick the brain of everyone around, and you too, what you guys kind of recommend or have seen success with in the past.
And so when you say provisioning, oh, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you looking to, when you, yeah, I'm probably gonna ask the same question. When you mean provisioning, are you talking about like how you bring those people into Salesforce to take action on them that are freemium users?
Sorry if I misquoted. It's more like the deal is like closed, right? And we have, let's say we close like an 8-pack, right? We're selling licenses by the number, rather than just like an enterprise level deal. And, there's some cleaning up of the account relationships. Also, in commercial real estate, it's unique because the account information is critical to the user experience. Because, if you work for a certain brokerage shop, you need to have your logo, your contact information, all that stuff pull all the way through. So it's not something that can be controlled by Salesforce, because it's something that the engineering team and product team likes to keep sacred. So for us, it's kind of it's a pretty, right now, it's a little more complicated than we'd like, because you have to make sure all the account stuff gets cleaned up so they're all nice and pretty out on the external side. You got to make sure that the parent-child relationship of like who's sort of the account that's being provisioned are pro packages, and basically just trying to see, is that something where the finance team has to sort of learn the business side of things a little better on the provisioning side, or do you kind of have someone that sits between a finance and a sales ops? Or, I guess when your billing process is very user intensive, where have you pushed the larger portion of that responsibility?
And before we get into that, Ryan, can you just maybe give the other attendees a sense of what it is that Crexi does, just very briefly, what Crexi does, what the ASP on it is, because that way it'll help give us context to help answer the question, and also kind of help them understand, like, oh yeah, you're like me, or like, oh, your sales motion is totally not like mine.
Yeah, totally. So Crexi is a marketplace. We're basically while we have some products that are for the whole commercial real estate industry, our main bread and butter right now is Crexi Pro, which is a tool for Crexi brokers. So basically our goal is like, we're a little bit like a Zillow for commercial real estate. And we basically sell a premium package to commercial real estate brokers so that they can reach more buyers, prioritize, their viewing on certain searches. We have a bunch of external marketing tools, and, we use a bunch of digital marketing tools on their behalf. Basically, the thought is pay for the sub. You're going to get more exposure, more buyers.
So it's like lower ASP, higher velocity. Because I had a bunch of friends who, so actually Sean Black, who was one of the earliest, he was one of my early sales mentors. He led sales at Trulia for a while early on. Mm-hmm. And so like here in San Francisco, and then eventually they moved out to Denver because it was like low ASP, high velocity, et cetera. And so I think what I'm hearing from you is, we have these packs, and it is a pack. Is that like I've got a property and I'm trying to list it, and like, so like, cool, here are 8 properties, and so that's what an 8-pack is, or whatever.
It's more of a user license thing. So it's more like we sell you like an unlimited. We have some smaller, like to your point, like I want this property to shine.
Sure.
Our main idea is unlimited plan. You're a Crexi Pro member. You can put as many properties as you want for 12 months, and it's like, Pete and Don sign up as a team. So that's a 2-pack, 3-pack.
Right.
So our ASP is
And that's probably because like you guys, because like brokers, commercial real estate brokers, they're kind of like lone cowboys, sort of like eat what you kill. It's like they work for JLL or they work for whoever, but like they kind of just work for themselves, right? Am I thinking about that right?
That's, I think, if we're putting our operation problems on the therapist couch right now, one of the toughest parts of our customer base is we're wedged between contacts and accounts, because like you said, there are brokers that are one lone wolves and they're an army of one, but there's also brokers that could also be part of a team. And while in theory that can be dictated almost like with like larger accounts versus SMB, but it doesn't always work that way. There's like a ton of guys who
it's like the model is like super. The reason why I wanted to ask is like there's JLL, huge company, and then our broker is this dude named Travis James that I went to undergrad with, and like I think he's got his like book of business, and I think he might have like an associate under him or whatever.
Totally.
And then there might be like a squad of like 5 folks who work together. And so any of those folks can buy from Crexi. And so then you guys have this challenge. Okay. I totally get it. So with that incremental context, Don, you want to take a shot on goal here?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds similar to what we were doing at Yammer, right? So Yammer was a freemium model. Anybody could sign up with an email. Yeah. And then anybody could activate an account with a credit card. Right. And so from the sales ops side of things, we would get a report on a daily basis of like, here's everybody that signed up on a credit card. Right. And then there was somebody on finance that we worked with to say, hey, we've confirmed that these people are paid members now. We've got to activate them within our backend system. It sounds like that's kind of the same thing you're running into. And then we had the whole enterprise side of the business, which all went through Salesforce. So there was that we would get that report, sales ops we would flag those people in Salesforce, but then we would also run that report past finance just to audit before we sent it to our engineering team to activate them. Volume, I mean, it was probably, I want to say maybe 100 a week. So it wasn't a huge volume, but it was something that we were responsible on the sales ops side because we were the ones that were processing sales. So there was somebody on the finance team that we interacted with to have those activations done on the engineering side.
Yeah, that's yeah, and I think the thing that ends up being really tough here, I think the kicker is what Ryan's talking about, is that like the provisioning has a bunch of stuff that is part of the product.
Right.
In their case, like they're sending probably like proposals and whatever through Crexy. So like the JLO logo's got to be good, and like Travis has got to have his like his like headshot or whatever.
And not to mention Travis may actually compete with people in his office. So sure. Travis and Joe Schmo down the hall, they cannot share any information because it's all proprietary and
siloed.
Yeah. So it feels, and so we had something similar at Monster, where, and like obviously Monster's like way more scaled. And I think, Ryan, if I recall correctly, how many reps do you guys have? You have like a couple dozen, right?
Right now I think we have about 20 AEs and we probably have 10 SDRs.
Yeah, and the reason why I want to say this is because I don't want to like over-prescribe something that like a big ass organization with a bunch of extra resources does and be like, hey, you should do this.
Yeah.
Right. But I think what we had there was just like literally like, if it turns out that this is a thorny problem and it's an important one, then maybe there's a thing that ought to own it. And like, and in you guys' case, it kind of feels like that might be customer success. Now the like what's the ASP on an 8-pack?
An
like
8-pack would be high. Like that could be our face rate is like $400, but that's negotiable from like a team perspective per month.
So
per
that
month.
Yeah. So we're talking about like 2G. Oh, per month. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what's interesting there, like, so these are not like tiny deals like with Yelp. I'm thinking through the level of automation that would be required. So one of our one of our reps at Atrium, Sean Cardenas, used to be a sales manager at Yelp. And like, you want to talk about like velocity sales? Holy God. And like, I think the ASP on their stuff was like, $400 a month or something like that.
Yeah.
Or less. So I think in you guys' case, the good news is the ASPs are not super small. And so like you could probably, and it also seems that the touch is very high and required. So like if something gets like messed up, it's like not good. So
right.
This feels to me that, and so one of the things that we had at Monster was, I don't know if it was called like product operations or something like that, but literally what would happen is like a deal would get closed or something would happen. Like either a deal, like an enterprise deal that was handled in Salesforce would get closed, or somebody would like self-service, and it would go through a workflow that then was administered by some other function. And that lived in, that might have lived under finance. I'm not exactly sure where it lived, but it certainly wasn't in sales operations because it was more like the guts, because you're interacting with the product. There's also, and then if you think about, especially in Crexy's case, like obviously if you guys are successful and scale up wildly, we're going to need to automate more and more of this. And like, so usually what ends up happening there is you start out doing things manually and it sucks and it consumes a bunch of like human resources. But then what ends up happening is you can start understanding how much human resources it consumes and then start prioritizing engineering resources to reduce the amount of human resources that is required. Like I'll give you an example at Atrium, like our customer success function helps our customers with like, dashboards and analytics and alert feeds and
experience stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they do that, but like, and there's an admin tool that they work in that is like ugly as sin. It's the Atrium admin tool. It's like full of sharp edges and because like we prioritize our engineering resources onto like wonderful like customer facing product and what have you, but what ends up happening is it impacts our customer success to customer ratios. So if
Mhm.
our customer success rep can only manage 40 accounts or 50 accounts or whatever, because they spend a bunch of their time dealing with like sharp edges in the admin tool, or having to like refactor org charts whenever somebody moves or whatever, well, then what we can do is we say, hey, you know what, we need to prioritize engineering resources against this, because our customer success reps cost X amount of money and they live in San Francisco. And so if we have them cover 60 accounts or 80 accounts, that's this amount of money versus not. So anyway, suffice it to say that that's why I think it might make sense for that to be closer and tighter, to like have a tighter interface with product in some sort of capacity. Because it seems like a lot of the provisioning that happens ends up really impacting the product, like the look and feel and stuff like that. And then moreover, another thing that's happening right now, my co-founder Jason is essentially like our glorified sales engineer, and we have a bunch of like configuration stuff that is all like API based right now. And so what ends up happening is like I just have our AEs just feed that to me and him, and it's just miserable for us. And we just but what ends up happening is it makes the pain very clear. Like, okay, cool, we're going to prioritize engineering resources to change the configuration between this organization logs their email as, using Outreach versus Mixmax versus Groove versus Salesloft, because we're doing it so frequently and using those API calls ends up being such a problem. Anyway, the point is like that can actually be a very productive tension, is to make that provisioning close to the place where it would ultimately get more scalably resolved.
Yeah. Because where it's come up is like, it is one of those things that's like, it's unglamorous, and it feels like one of those things that should be, provisioning accounts is a simple concept that should be, very straightforward. But the problem where it becomes is, it is a recurring model. And one thing that we always want to be super cognizant of is, accidental churn. Users churning who don't know they're churning because of payment issues, right? That's something we always want to keep to a minimum. And the reporting on that can be hampered if the provisioning is not done correctly. So that's kind of just seeing the end result we want to get to. And it's one of those things where, is this something that, finance needs to own? Because obviously this is going to affect the reporting we do. It's going to affect all that stuff. But at the same time, to get people back on, and that user experience is kind of owned by CS, but also then AEs are the one that's the last point of contact. So I think you're probably right in the sense that it probably needs to be something manual, owned by someone who's just kind of like dead, especially at the since it is high volume, there's plenty of work to do in terms of the sheer amount of provisioning I have to do. That it is probably worth to have someone own and figure out how to automate later.
Also, I think the other thing that you have to consider is, what are the best alternatives? Also, like, given the fact that like you guys are scaling up a bunch of your sales function, like having sales operations work on this stuff kind of seems like, a pretty meaty opportunity cost. Don, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, like, it's an opportunity for someone on the product side, like Pete was saying. Like, I would hope someone on CX would want to sit down with you and understand, like, what is that provisioning experience like for a customer? If we are having to do it all manually, like, how can CX work with product to make that as easy as possible? Because like I was describing the Yammer situation on how, like, for finance, it was just a matter of turning somebody on, and then there was a lot of walkthroughs that we had built into the product at Yammer. It was like, okay, now that you're a paid product, now that you're a paid customer, make sure you add your logo. Here's how to add your logo. Upload it here. And there was a lot of intuitive tutorial type things that we had built into the product to help people walk through those, so that they could provision themselves with what they needed to have it look like from a as now that they're a new customer, what it looked like for them as being a paid customer versus the free version, right? And it sounds like a lot of what you have is pretty complicated, so there's probably still a lot of hand holding. But I think if someone on CX, like, does someone on CX even know that you're running into this problem from a sales operations perspective, and at least exposing it to them so that they know that it exists? Because they may be able to look at it and go, oh, we just need to do XYZ, and then all of a sudden a lot of that
this is easy.
Yeah, this is easy. Like, and maybe you
That's
just
a
don't know that.
Yeah.
And then it takes all of that lift off of you.
Right. Cool. Yeah. No, thank you guys. That was helpful. Really quick sorry if this could be a 2-second question. Do you guys, how long would you guys have had your Salesforce linked to like your backend system versus adding in like a customer data layer in between?
I can talk to that. Like what we did at Yammer, that was one of the big projects that I worked on, which was a lot of fun. Was, we had all this product data, right? We had all this user information, usage, adoption, logins, everything else, but we had no way to relate it on our Salesforce side, right? So
Right.
we'd had the connection of like, okay, we know that this person ties to this person in Salesforce, but we had no way of reporting like, oh, here's all the usage information, here's when they're logging in, here's the highest adopted user at each of our
Yep.
companies, and then bringing
Right.
them out, and then bringing in all that firmographic information of like, here's the geographies where we have the most logins and this and that. So the project that we worked on, and the product that does it today, I mean, this is like 10 years ago, right? So the product that does it today that I've seen it, that I've used at past companies, is Looker. So Looker kind of acts as that data warehouse to say, okay, hey, I'm going to suck in all this data from Salesforce, I'm going to relate it to all this user data, and then here's all your beautiful reports that you can run around it.
Yeah.
Like the sooner you can bring that in, the better, right? Because it just gives a lot, especially being a freemium model, it gives so much information to your sales rep to say like, hey, here are the people on your, that are using the freemium user, that are using the freemium product that you want to go after to turn into paid customers. And then if you get, so if you find out somebody from Jones Lang LaSalle is using it and they're not a paid customer, that's like a big deal. But someone on the engineering side is not going to necessarily know that, someone with a JLL.com email that's using the product for free is an important prospect, So
Totally.
Yeah.
the sooner you can do it, I would take a look at Looker. I mean, I know Looker does that really well.
There's the way that we do this right now is we pipe data out of, so we use Segment to send
Segment's the
app,
other one, yeah.
That was
app data to our data warehouse, which is Redshift, and then we use a product called Census to send data into Salesforce specifically. So we use it for customer usage data.
Got it.
So we send that onto the contact object, and you can do supplement count object as well. Cool. So I know that we only have 15 minutes left here. So
Thank
Ryan,
you. Sorry, I'll concede the rest of my time. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome to see you. See you, man. And then, so I think there was another kind of really meaty question that I thought would be cool here from V. So, and I think he had to bolt. How do you know if another sales manager is needed? Currently, I have one sales manager for 6 mid-market and 3 SMB AEs. However, the manager spends almost all the time on mid-market AEs because the deal sizes are often 15 to 20 times the SMB deals, 15K of MRR versus 1K of MRR. What would be a framework for thinking about a new SMB only sales manager that would justify the expense there? This is a good question. So essentially the question is, hey, it feels like there is it feels like there is an opportunity for incremental management here. And specifically because it seems that 3 of our SMB AEs are kind of not being sufficiently babysat, if you will. But like, what's the point at which that could be justified? Don, do you have a perspective on that?
Every time I've tried to run that, I've used the I've used the Google Doc of yours that you created like 5-6 years ago, the bottom up versus top down model, and really looking to analyze, how large is the deal, how much effort does it take to get an opportunity, how many meetings does it take to get to an opportunity, how many calls, how many emails, that model is what I've always used to answer that question.
Yeah. So I think the way to, exactly. So just to kind of unpack that, I think the way to think about this is, in general, like a manager. So you want to, the question at bottom here is about economic efficiency as relates to a set of sellers. And so I think what is being described here is, okay, 6 mid-market account executives and 3 SMB AEs. And so in general, what you want to see, there's the notion of cost of sale. So, we have this much ARR that an AE can do. And so what Don was talking about is bottoms up. And so usually the most the most appropriate way of modeling sales organizations is to go bottoms up. And so you say, hey, we have these AEs and they do 600K of ARR. They're able to do $600,000 of bookings a year. And maybe there might be different types of AEs. There might be, hey, we have these mid-market AEs and they're able to do $900,000 in bookings a year. The reason why they're able to do $900,000 in bookings is because their ASP is, okay, 15K of MRR. Okay, that's like legit. It's like 100K, right? Actually more than that, like, 170K. Okay, wow. So they can do 170K deals, and maybe they close one of them a month because it takes 10 meetings in order to close them, and there's like a 20% win rate on it, and blah 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 blah. So we know that those are the unit economics of that rep, of that type of rep, that mid-market rep, of whom we have 6. And then over here we've got these 3 SMB reps, and their deals are 12K. I think it was $1,000 of MRR. And so then what we would say is, cool. Well, at what point is a manager, the question here is, at what point is a manager justified? And the answer to that usually is, in general, you want to see anywhere between like a 20 or 30% cost of sale on, and that's just kind of like a rule of thumb. It really is a question of like how cheap it is for you to get capital, et cetera. But in general, you don't want to be paying, say, a rep 150K OTE or a 200K OTE, and then they deliver to you like $200,000 of bookings a year. Like that's not super, that wouldn't be super great for your business if you're only getting paid back in year 2 or year 3 or whatever. So generally, like a good rule of thumb is that you want to be at like a 20% or a 30%, south of a 30% cost of sale. But importantly, the manager is part of that, right? So the manager is essentially just like a layer of I like to think of I like to think of managers as kind of like software, like really expensive software that helps manage reps. And so what you want to, oftentimes, like I think a good rule of thumb there is you want to see like a 5% lift that sits on top of that. So if you want to justify an incremental manager, what you would say is, okay, how much is that manager going to cost? Are they going to cost us, $200,000 OTE or 250K OTE or 150K OTE, depending on, the cost of a sales manager in your market and the type of sales manager that you need. If you need a Yelp sales manager, it's going to be a little bit that you're 5 stars or your Envoy or your whoever, and you're selling to like SMB, not Envoy, 5 stars or like Toast or whatever, and you're selling to SMBs. Well, less expensive, higher velocity sale, that sales manager is going to cost a certain amount. If you're, MemSQL or Domino Data Lab or Databricks or something like that, it might be a more expensive enterprise sales manager. So essentially, what does that person cost? And then how much bookings are they going to oversee? And so I think in this case, let's imagine, so currently we have 1 sales manager with 6 mid-market account executives and 3 SMB AEs. The SMB AEs are doing $1,000 MRR deals. Let's say that they are able to do 5 of those a month. Not terrible, right? So 5 of them a month. So 10K AS or 10K ACV ASP, 5 of them a month, 50K times 12, call it 500K times 3 reps is $1.5 million of bookings that SMB AE manager would be sitting on top of. And I think the answer to that is like 1 manager for 3 SMB AEs that are at that level of performance would probably be pretty expensive, right? So if you have a 200K OTE sales manager, or 180K OTE sales manager, essentially responsible for whatever I said, it was like $1.5 million in bookings. Well, that's an incremental like 10% cost of sale, right there on top of like your 20% from your rep. And like, don't forget, you have SDRs in there as well. So in that case, you might have you're kind of layering across something that's a pretty expensive resource across, you're essentially amortizing it across not that many reps. So that on its face, it seems a little expensive. Now, what you might say is our intention is to grow to 6. Our intention is to grow to whatever. And I think that, so that's like one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, in this case, the mid-market manager is spending all their time, or the manager is spending all their time on the mid-market reps because that's those deals are bigger. Well, that also makes sense too. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like the opportunity cost might be pretty substantial, where if this person isn't managing those other reps, and their performance is deteriorating as a result, that would, if they're just fine, then maybe we actually don't have a problem. But I think the implication of the question is that there actually is a problem there. Then we might say, okay, well then maybe it's worth it, and we would want to grow to this. Or alternatively, what we would do is we'd say, we can get an incremental manager who then takes 2 of that mid-market reps and the 3 SMB reps, right? Or maybe another approach here is to just do better sales management, where we have more rigor around time boxing and saying, hey, maybe like, what if all of my time is being spent riding along, essentially being like a super rep on my mid-market AE like sales calls? That's probably not the highest leverage thing I could be doing. Why do I need to be on all those calls? Are there ways that I could have more leverage, where maybe instead of riding along on those calls, where I'm just kind of like sitting there nodding and smiling, maybe I'm listening to the calls on like chorus or gong after the fact, or maybe I'm only riding along in the closing calls, or maybe I'm only like, they do disco and then the intermediary calls I'm not on, and then I'm involved in some of the like proposal and negotiation calls instead. So essentially like unbundling the manager role and then saying, hey, I'm going to stop doing these things on the mid-market team, and I'm going to redirect some of that time over to the SMB team. Those would be some of the approaches that I might think about taking. Don, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, like the way, when I looked at that, when I reread that question, it's like, you know, you have one manager that's going after 9 people, and that's a pretty sizable, that's a lot of people to manage, right? So
yeah.
I can see why she's probably focusing her time on the higher value people, right?
For
So
sure.
she's probably, you know, she's focusing on those 6 and neglecting those 3, because that's, I mean, she, you know, there's only so many hours in a day, right? So,
yep.
You know, the one thing that the one thing that I thought it was an idea, as you could kind of road test, would be, you know, go ahead and dedicate that person to manage the mid-market team, and then maybe have a team lead, like take one of the more talented SMB folks and put them into a team lead role, because there's only 3 people. And then if you do grow that team, you know, maybe that person does grow into being that manager as that SMB team grows, you know, because presumably there is room for that team to grow. You know, hopefully, I would think, but I mean, not knowing what the rest of the model looks like, you know, capacity, you know, if they're at capacity, then maybe this a team lead is all you need. And then that team lead reports up to the SMB manager.
Yeah. Another thing that you could do too, I like the phrase that Don used, like resourcing model, utilization model. It really just it's about hours in the day, jobs to be done, and like how we can match them together. So in this case, if we have a sales manager who's managing 9 reps, that's obviously a pretty large span of control. Things are going to be dropping. And so what she's doing is she's probably redirecting her attention to the highest value things. And then moreover, she's probably getting super deal focused, which like sales managers are already really bad at being way too deal focused, as opposed to being like top of funnel focused, or like management focused, or, you know, managing by metric or what have you. So you're probably getting more and more of that. Well, could maybe her manager manage the SMB team? That could be another thing.
That's what I was thinking. Like if you do put someone in a team lead role, have that team lead roll up to that other person, so that it offloads it from her. But there's still an oversight at a high level for the whole team.
Yeah. And I guess another thing that you could do there too is, if the question is, so like, what are the jobs to be done that are not being done for the SMB AEs? Like, does there need to be more seniority riding along on their calls in order to help coach them? Or are there more basic things happening, like pipeline reviews aren't happening, or what have you? So it's kind of like rank the things the balls that are being dropped on that side, and then maybe take those jobs to be done and then connect it to someone, maybe a more senior rep on the mid-market AE team. you can imagine, right? Like, hey, identify somebody who potentially has management aspirations to then
Yep.
take some of their time and ride, if it's riding along these calls in order to help these folks, or if it's like it's probably more, that's probably something that would be more attuned to an AE, like an AE could do, is they could ride along and like give coaching tips and what have you. Like actually, so Cindy Shubitani leads SDR at Procore. So she's delightful. She used to lead SDR at Reflective, and before that at Financial Force. And one of the things that they have at Procore is they have oh God, what are they called? They're called like an advisor, a sales advisor on the SDR team. And literally what it is, it's like a team lead who is specifically targeted at coaching and enabling the SDRs themselves. So they're former SDRs. I don't think they're quoted, but that's, and so this would not be a thing I would advocate for an organization that's as small as the one that we're talking about right now, because they don't have extra resources laying around. Like Procore has a lot of extra resources, but you can imagine doing something similar where part of an AE's time is like they have a little brother, a little sis, kind of like, you know, a little sis in a sorority or what have you, and they're responsible for that SMB AE. And what that means is either listening to their calls or riding along on some of these things in order to help with that. That might not be the ball that's dropping on the ground with the SMB AEs. Probably my hypothesis would be that the things that are probably dropping on the ground is probably like pipeline reviews. So I bet if we were to look at the analytics on the SMBA team, I bet they're just like drowning in ops that are like untouched, like 90 days and what have you, because there probably isn't good pipeline rigor. But that could be something. I can't think of an example of like pure pipeline review, although that's maybe an interesting. I mean, we do group pipeline reviews where sometimes I have the AEs beat up on each other if I have to take another call, and I just have the AEs do group pipeline review with each other. So if that's the thing that's dropping, you could imagine doing something like that. But you have to start with rigor to begin with, so they actually have a framework by which to like do the work themselves. That might be another idea there too. Anything last on that, Don?
I'm just trying to think, like on the pipeline stuff, like if it is pipeline reviews that are falling, like again, like what pipeline is something that I love digging into. You know, a lot of what I've always tried to do, you know, to help the AEs themselves so that they don't end up in that situation, is to alert them. You know, like, hey, you have a deal at stage 1 that's supposed to close in 30 days. Please take action on it. Either get engaged or push the date out. You know, do what needs to be done so that they don't get in that situation where it's like, oh my gosh, why is 90% of your pipeline set to close on June 30th and it's June 1st? You know,
that's So essentially, what you're talking about is like automating a sales manager behavior. So actually, this is something that we do quite a bit at Atrium with our own product for ourselves, and then for other people, we have an opportunity health concept that allows you to do a bunch of like pivoting. And so actually, Sean, one of our reps, the former sales manager from Yelp, he came up with this idea. We call it calendar police, where what it does, it's a view of op health, where it looks at it's essentially all ops that are closing this month or next that don't have a meeting in the future. And then that's just set to like fire out to the reps on Mondays, and it's essentially just like get your ass in gear. But if you think about that, it's like a very narrow slice of what a sales manager would do, but like automated in some sort of capacity, right? I think that's a really good point.
But there's a really high value for that, right? Because then at the highest level, you know, when your VP of sales is looking at the pipeline, there's not garbage sitting in there, right? So I mean, it's a small thing, but it has there's a high yield on making sure that they stay on top of those things.
But I think if you generalize this harness, or like you generalize this framework, it's like, cool. What are the jobs to be done? Which ones are dropping? And actually, this was something that I talked a little bit about in the deck I put together on sales management in a downturn. It's on Atrium's resource library. But this essentially is like, hey, what are the things where we can get what are the things that we can automate? Like if we have to, if you have a rift situation where you have to go from 2 managers managing 12 reps to 1 manager managing 9 reps, it's like, okay, well, what are the previous tasks that maybe I did with human labor that now maybe I can automate? So if that's like calendar, calendar audit, that might be one.
Yeah.
If that means like, okay, I can't ride along anymore, but maybe now what I can do is I can listen. One of my favorite things to do is like listen to chorus calls at 2x or 2.5x, because that way you can rather than writing along. I mean, the other way I do this is I write along with calls and essentially just like do email while I'm not actually paying attention to the call, which is probably not the most effective thing. But you're just there since the AE can pull you in the event that a question is asked that they don't understand. But yeah, like look for things that potentially like the job stack that look for things that can be pulled out and then automated in some sort of capacity. That's probably like a more generalized framework that you could do. They're like, yeah, we can't afford a new sales manager here yet, but maybe what we can do is look at the things that aren't being done, hand it to somebody else, or automate some part of that.
Yep.
Cool. So I think we're out of time here, which is awesome. Don, this was super fun. I thought it was good. Yeah, I had a great time. So I'm going to email everybody and
I'd be happy to do it
feedback.
again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna email people with their to get their feedback on this and see what we could if they thought it was any good, if they thought it was garbage, how frequently they would be interested in seeing this in other sort of iterations. But yes, so we'll good to see you, man. You have a good you have a good weekend, and everybody who attended, thanks for
everybody.
coming. See ya.
All right, take care, everybody.